My name is Kate Moore and I'm the Invasive Species Engagement Officer in the Invasive Species Unit at the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So thank you for joining us this lunchtime. Today I'll be providing an introduction to invasive species in an Irish context, and I will be introducing some common invasives, and we will discuss ways in which you can help stop their spread. So as I said, I work within the Invasive Species Unit, and our role is to provide national coordination and management of information on Ireland's non-native invasive species, and also to support the National Parks and Wildlife Service with the implementation and reporting on the EU invasive alien regulations. So to start, it would be good to discuss what do we mean when we say a species is native or non-native. Well, I'm afraid it's a bit complicated. So there's no set definition of native or non-native species for all species groups within Ireland. So with regard to terrestrial mammals, we say that anything that was present prior to the year 1500 could be considered native. The BSBI classes native plants as ones that have arrived here naturally, so that's without the help of people, since the end of the last glaciation. But when it comes to insects, we've very little information on native status, so it's trickier to say what species are native and which ones are non-native. So where do we get our list of non-native species? So we get these from existing checklists and published sources where a species may already be tagged as non-native. For example, the EU list of species of union concern. And we can also classify non-native species through risk assessment. And this gives us our catalogue of Ireland's non-native species, which is currently at about 1,277 species. It's important to note that most non-native species that arrive here do not cause harm, and only a small proportion are considered to be invasive. So today we're discussing invasive species. So what are they? An invasive species is a plant, animal, or pathogen that is not native to Ireland. It has been brought here on purpose or accidentally by people, and it has the ability to establish and spread. And when it gets here, it can have a negative impacts on the environment, the economy, and the way in which we live. So how do invasive species get here and spread? So invasive species can be introduced on purpose or by accident. They may be planted in gardens or kept as pets before they are released or escape. They can also arrive here accidentally as hitchhikers on vehicles or on personal belongings, or even as contaminants in imported goods. In Ireland, the numbers of invasive species are rising due to increased travel, trade, and global connections. And this is a trend that we see globally. So one example of how invasive species get here is through the interconnectivity of our waterways. So we saw how in the early 90s, the zebra mussel and then the Asian clam in 2010 arrived here through the Shannon-Erne waterway, which is actually a canal that connects the River Shannon and the River Erne in the north. So what impacts do invasive species have when they get here? So we know that they can alter habitats and ecosystems, like Lagrosiphon major, which forms dense canopies which blocks out light from the water column, and this has an impact on our native submerged plants. Some species displace our native species. So in invaded areas, the quagga mussel can significantly reduce native plant, invertebrate, and fish populations. It's a filter feeder and it removes plankton from the water column, having knock-on impacts on the species that rely on plankton. Other species compete for space and resources. So you'll be familiar with the grey squirrel, which outcompetes the native red squirrel for space and food. And it's also known to spread squirrel pox virus, which can be fatal to red squirrels. Some invasive species will prey on our native species. So for example, American mink is known to prey on native bird species, which results in reduced biodiversity. And other invasives interfere with recreational activities. So invasive plants can block waterways and interfere with navigation and activities like angling and paddle sports. And we know that invasive species have a huge economic cost. So in the last assessment, it was estimated that the annual cost of invasive species to the economies of Ireland and Northern Ireland was over €261 million. And this includes the direct costs associated with managing and controlling these species, as well as the indirect impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems. So if we look at the management of lagar siphon, also known as curly waterweed in Lough Corrib in Galway, it was first reported there in 2005, and since then over 4 million has been spent on the control of this species, and there's ongoing annual costs of €300,000. But without this action, the environmental and economic damage would have been very severe. So under the European Union regulations, it is an offence to knowingly release or allow the escape of certain invasive species. And the management of invasive species is the responsibility of the landowner. So this means if there's an invasive species on your property, it is up to you to manage it. But if an invasive species is found on public land, it would be for the local authority to deal with it. And if it's on a protected site, then that may be an issue for the National Parks and Wildlife Service. There's lots of information on the legislation policy relating to invasive species on our website, invasives.ie, but you can direct queries relating to licenses under this regulation to the NPWS, and also you can just direct general queries about biodiversity policy to the NPWS as well. So under the EU regulation, there is 88 invasive alien species of union concern, and EU member states, including Ireland, must prevent, minimise or mitigate their adverse impact. And here are some of the 88 species that are already established in Ireland. At a national level, we have the first schedule list of invasive alien species of national concern, and there's about 71 species on this list, and some of those are also EU regulated. And if you want to find the list of species, that's available on our website, invasives.ie. So now let's take a look at some marine invasive species that you may come across along our coastline. Starting with wireweed, also known as sargassum. So this is a seaweed which is found on sheltered and exposed shores, and it can also be found in intertidal rock pools and in subtidal waters. It's dark to light brown in colour, and it typically grows to 3 meters, but can grow up to 16 meters. And it has a growth rate of 10 centimeters per day. And it has the ability to form large floating mats on the water surface. So how does this species spread? So it's very fast growing, and it has the ability to self-fertilize. And broken pieces of the plant will drift, grow very quickly, and travel over long distances. So what impacts does wireweed have on our environment? So like lagar siphon, it has the ability to block sunlight from underwater plants. It also outcompetes some of our native species, and it forms thick surface mats along the water, which actually can inhibit swimmers and boats. Another marine invasive species that you may come across is the slipper limpet, and this may be confused with some of our native limpets. It grows up to about 5 centimeters in length, and its shell color varies between cream, white, yellow, or pinkish with red or brown blotches. And it has the ability to spread by forming chains of up to 15 individuals, and these can actually starve and smother native shellfish and be a serious pest of oyster and mussel beds. So it's quite impactful. So moving on to the terrestrial environment, to some invasive species that you might be familiar with, starting with giant hogweed. So this is a very large plant that's often found along watercourses. It can grow up to 5 meters in height, and its leaves can grow up to 3 meters wide. So it has a hollow stem with distinctive purple blotches and bristles, and it has a parsnip-like taproot. In the summertime, it develops white umbrella-shaped flowers, and in the autumn time, it will shed its seeds and the plant will die, and then the dead stems remain during winter. So giant hogweed should not be confused with our native hogweed species, which is much shorter and smaller and has rounder leaves, in comparison to giant hogweed, which has more sharply divided leaves. So giant hogweed can produce a huge number of seeds, 15,000 annually, and these seeds can be dispersed by water or wind or even along road corridors. What impacts does giant hogweed have? It shades out our native species. It has the ability to destabilize riverbanks, affecting water quality, and it is a health hazard. So the sap it produces can cause nasty burns to the skin, which can become reactivated by the sunlight for several years afterwards. So it's very important that you do not touch giant hogweed without appropriate PPE. When it comes to management, treating it with herbicide is the most effective way, but you must use a herbicide that's approved for use near water. You can also collect and dispose the seed head to help eliminate the seed bank, but treatment may need to be repeated over multiple years. And it would be important to consider working on a catchment level with surrounding landowners to ensure that land is not reinfested. Many of you will be familiar with Japanese knotweed and have seen the signs along the road where the local authorities are controlling this plant. So it's a herbaceous plant that grows up to 3 meters in height, and it has shield-shaped leaves with a flat base. And its stem is hollow and bamboo-like and arranged in a zigzag pattern. And in the summertime, it produces small, creamy white flowers. So how does it spread? So underground, Japanese knotweed forms systems of roots and rhizomes. A rhizome is an underground stem. And when fragments of the rhizomes are separated from the plant, they get carried by water and soil and can start new growth. The plant can also be spread through disposal of waste material. So Japanese knotweed, again, outcompetes our native species and causes riverbank erosion, and it's even known to cause structural damage to buildings. So we see how the appearance of Japanese knotweed changes throughout the year. So in the springtime, spear-shaped shoots emerge, and then in summertime, it has herbaceous green leaves and it produces small white flowers later in the summer into autumn. And then in the winter time, the plant will die back and all that will remain will be dead canes. There are other knotweed species that you may come across, and these should be treated in the same way as Japanese knotweed. So with regards to management of Japanese knotweed, it would be important to seek professional advice and develop a site-specific plan. It's very important that you do not cut, mow, or trim or disturb the plant in any way, as this could spread it further. Herbicide treatment over several years is the usual way of treating this. So the herbicide can be applied directly to the leaf, or it can be applied to the stem, which is preferred for larger infestations or those next to water. The alternative is to excavate the plant, but this is very expensive and disruptive to the environment, and you will also require a license from the National Parks and Wildlife Service for the safe disposal of Japanese knotweed plant material or of the contaminated soil. Another invasive species that we find along watercourses is Himalayan balsam, and this grows up to 3 meters tall. It has green, jagged, serrated leaves and a hollow brown-green stem, and it produces pink trumpet-shaped flowers that bees are very attracted to. And how does it spread? So the seeds are released from pods when touched. These seeds can be easily spread by waterways. So when the plant dies back in winter, it leaves bare banks which are exposed to erosion. And then the sediment can end up in the river, impacting water quality and aquatic biodiversity. And it's also known to impact fungi in the soil. So balsam bashing is the best way to tackle Himalayan balsam. So it is easy to uproot by hand as it has a very shallow root. So you can simply grab the root from its lowest point, but you must be careful that you remove the whole plant. It's better to wait until June when the plant is at a good height but has not yet flowered. And once you pull the plant, you can then snap the root. And then you just pile up the material to the side and leave it to degrade. You may have to repeat balsam bashing in August if you have new growth. Another invasive species that you may be familiar with would be rhododendron, and this is mainly associated with woodlands and sometimes found on bogs, and some people may also have it in their garden. So this is a large shrub that grows up to 5 meters. It's evergreen and it has dull green waxy leaves, and it produces these really nice pink purple flowers. Each plant can produce over 1 million seeds, and the branches can root when they make contact with the ground. It's a very problematic plant which forms dense canopies that shade out our native species, and it also produces chemicals so that nothing else can grow around it. So rhododendron usually requires mechanical removal followed by chemical treatment. Stems are cut close to the ground, but not so close that you would lose track of them. And then herbicide is applied directly to the cut surface as soon as possible after cutting. Delaying the application of the herbicide will reduce the effectiveness of the treatment. Alternatively, the stumps can be drilled and the herbicide can be applied to the drilled hole. Giant rhubarb is another large invasive plant species. It grows up to 2 meters and it has umbrella-shaped leaves that measure 1.5 meters across. Its leaf stalks are reddish and covered with bristles and spines, and it produces a cone-like flower that can grow up to 1 meter. Again, this one is spread through small fragments and can produce a huge number of seeds annually. And it tends to grow in clumps, blocking out other plants, and it also is known to block drains and streams. So with regards to management, it's advised to remove the flower head as early as possible before the seeds get a chance to germinate, and herbicide can also be applied at the end of the growing season. Another species that we find in wet areas is American skunk cabbage, and you may see this at the moment. It's in flower this time of year. It grows up to 1.5 meters. It has glossy, leathery green leaves, and it has a large yellow sheet that surrounds the flowers. And it's recognized by its smell, which is known to smell like rotten flesh. The flowers, as I said, appear around this time of year in April and May, and the plant will die back in winter. And the plant spreads through rhizomes and seeds. Again, this plant excludes our native vegetation and reduces biodiversity. So it's not just plants that we have an issue with. There's also invasive invertebrates, including the New Zealand flatworm. So you may want to keep an eye out for this species in your garden. So the New Zealand flatworm is dark purple brown on top and pale underneath, and it has a smooth ribbon-like body. So it doesn't have any segments like you would see on an earthworm, and it's pointed at both ends. It's about 1 centimeter in width and 6 centimeters long, but it can stretch up to 20 centimeters. And it will often be found coiled up and covered in mucus when it's at rest. So how does this spread? Well, it lays egg capsules, which actually look like blackcurrants, and these are mainly produced in springtime. And the flatworm can be spread through contaminated plants or within soil. And unfortunately, the New Zealand flatworm is known to prey on our native earthworms, which has a knock-on impact for soil health. So what to do if you find a New Zealand flatworm? So you should always examine any plants that you buy in from garden centres or shops. If you do find a flatworm, take a photo of it. Let the garden centre or the shop know that you've found a flatworm in the material so that they can check their other stock. And then we ask that you report your sighting to us at the National Biodiversity Data Centre. And you can destroy any flatworm or eggs that you find. And you should spend time checking your garden or farm for New Zealand flatworm. So there is a campaign in the UK called Potwatch, which is developed to look for New Zealand flatworm. And it recommends that you spend 10 minutes in your garden looking for the flatworm. They're known to hide from the sunlight, so you should check damp, dark spots like underneath wood or stones or plastic or beneath plant pots. So moving on to freshwater invasive species that we might find in our rivers or lakes. So we've mentioned lagersiphon before, so it's also known as curly waterweed, and this is a submerged aquatic plant. It has long, hollow, fragile stems that have many branches, and the leaves are dark green and translucent, and they curve and spiral around the stem. This plant reproduces from stem fragments, and it's known to spread on boats and angling equipment. So what are the impacts of lagersiphon? So again, it outcompetes our native plant communities. It can alter the macroinvertebrate communities in the water, and this has knock-on impacts for fish and other species. And it's also known to interfere with navigation, angling, and recreation. The zebra mussel is a freshwater invasive invertebrate, and it first arrived in Ireland into Lough Derg in the early 90s, and it's thought to have come in on second-hand boats which were imported from Britain. So this is a triangular-shaped mussel that measures 3 to 4 centimeters in length, and you will see on its shell that it has alternating dark and light bands, which give it its zebra name. And these can occur in a zigzag pattern, although this pattern can vary very greatly. It is often confused with the quagga mussel, which is another freshwater invasive species. However, the zebra mussel is more triangular in shape and has a distinct ridge and lays flat. So how does this spread? It can attach to most hard surfaces, including boats, quays, rocks, and other mussel species. And it can also attach to aquatic plants and soft sediments. And it's been known to spread on leisure boats and damp angling gear. So zebra mussel causes the decline of native mussel species as it can colonize their shells and habitat. And it can also cause changes in nutrient cycles and reduce levels of phytoplankton. And it's also known to cause blockages, leading to costly removal efforts. So a lesser reported invasive species that we have in Ireland is the Chinese mitten crab. It's been recorded on multiple occasions in the Waterford estuary. So it's quite distinctive. It has a mitten-like fur on its 2 front claws, and its legs are long and hairy. And it has a small body shell, which is about 5 centimeters across, and it has 4 spines on either side. It's typically brownish to greenish in color and has a notch between the eyes. And this is spread as a hitchhiker in ships or boats, maybe in the ballast water of boats. And it's known to burrow into riverbanks, affecting the integrity of the habitat. So there are no other freshwater crabs present in Ireland. So if you spot a crab in a river, upstream in a river in Ireland, it could potentially be Chinese mitten crab. However, as adults migrate to estuaries in autumn, there's a possibility of confusion with some of our native marine crabs, such as the shore crab. However, none of our native crabs possess the distinctive hairs or mittens on the claws. So we've discussed some plants and some animals, and now we have an invasive mold called crayfish plague. And as the name suggests, this is a deadly water mold that kills native white-clawed crayfish, and it spreads via spores that survive in damp conditions for up to 21 days. And it can be carried by non-native crayfish or contaminated gear. And once it's present within the system, it can spread widely and persist indefinitely. So we ask that if you find any dead crayfish, that you report those sightings to us, because this could be an indication that there is crayfish plague in that system. So how do we tackle the threat of invasives? So key to tackling the threat from invasives is to take measures to prevent their introduction and their spread. So these include regulations. So as we've already said, there's legislation in place limiting the movement of certain species, and there is ban on trade on some of those regulated species. Also border checks for contaminated goods and vehicles. And we also ask that people uptake biosecurity measures. If invasive species do arrive here, we need to be able to detect them and report them as soon as possible. And rapid response actions to contain and remove them can then be undertaken. Failing that, a species may spread and become widely established. If that happens, long-term control may be the only remaining option. So 5 ways you can help. Number 1, biosecurity. So we have a number of biosecurity campaigns, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. But first, what do we mean by biosecurity? So biosecurity includes all the measures to prevent the introduction and spread of an invasive species. These measures can be very simple. They can be part of a regular routine. They can be low cost and effective. And ultimately, they benefit biodiversity, ecosystems, and our own interests. And they will save time, effort, and money in the long run. And it's important that we use biosecurity because it can't be optional. The risks are too high. So at the pre-border stage, we ban certain species from trade. At the border, we check goods and vehicles. And then at the post-border, we uptake biosecurity measures. So one of our campaigns, which you might be familiar with already, is Check, Clean, Dry. And this is a campaign and a set of practices aimed at preventing the spread of invasive species and diseases in waterways. So we know that contaminated gear is one of the most common causes of the spread of invasive species to new waterways. Invasive plants and animals can be small and hard to spot, so are easily spread on damp equipment and clothing. All water users can protect our wildlife and the environment by following the Check, Clean, Dry code. So we ask that you check your gear after leaving the water and remove anything that you find and leave it at the site. You must clean everything thoroughly as soon as you can, and it's better if you use hot water of at least 45 degrees Celsius or high pressure spray. And we then ask that you dry your gear completely, so everything must be left to dry for 48 hours. If you can't let your equipment dry fully, disinfectants are an option, and they certainly have a role to play in stopping the spread of pathogens like crayfish plague. So if everything cannot be dry for at least 48 hours before re-entering the water, then disinfect it. If you want to know more about Check, Clean, Dry, we've produced a video on it, which is available on our YouTube channel and our website. Another biosecurity campaign that we promote is Be Plant Wise, and this campaign is focused on preventing the spread of invasive plants from gardens and ponds into natural environments. So what entails in Be Plant Wise? So know what you grow, choose the right plants for your garden or pond, stop the spread, keep your plants in your garden and don't let them escape or disperse into the wild. And make sure that you compost with care. So dispose of your unwanted plants and roots and other material properly. And with that, we ask that you only plant native species that are of native provenance that have been grown within Ireland. We ask that you avoid wildflower seed mixes, as there is a high risk of importing invasive species with these. And we ask that you leave areas to naturally generate or if cover is actually necessary, use a certified grass seed mix. Our third biosecurity campaign is Be Pet Wise, and the purpose of this campaign is to educate pet owners and traders about the potential for pets to become invasive and to promote responsible pet ownership practices. Through research, so thoroughly research any pet before acquiring it, especially exotic pets. Ensure pets cannot escape their enclosures and are kept safely. Never release pets into the wild, as this can harm our native ecosystem. And if you can no longer care for a pet, rehome it responsibly. Secondly, we ask that you report your sightings of invasive species online through the online forum, and you can find this on our website at invasives.ie. We also ask that you include a photo with any of your records, as this will help us verify the record. So we often get asked what happens your records once it's submitted. So once a sighting is submitted via the online form, it enters a central database of unvalidated records. And the location of the sighting and basic details are immediately visible on Ireland's Citizen Science portal. The record then goes through a verification process. So staff will periodically review the submissions of invasive species, and photos and other details will help us verify the species identity. Experts may then be consulted if we are not able to verify the identity of the species here at the data centre. Verified sightings are added to the National Invasive Species Database, and these are then shared on biodiversity maps, and they may also be shared with global networks like GBIF. Unverified sightings remain in a holding database. If a sighting is of a tagged alert invasive species, an automated alert is triggered within an hour, and this gets sent to staff at the data centre, who will review it and verify the record urgently. Verified alerts are forwarded to the relevant authorities for a rapid response. So it's really important that you continue to submit your sightings of invasive species, as this helps give us a clearer picture of the spread of invasive species across the country. We also ask that you manage invasives without delay. So get to know what species are on your property and ensure correct identification. Develop a site-specific plan. And consider biosecurity and avoid unnecessary disturbance. Always adhere to best practice. Ensure the information you gather is from a reliable source. Seek professional advice if needed. Ensure that you have obtained any necessary permissions from relevant authorities before taking action. And you may want to consider contacting adjacent landowners to coordinate control and management. Manage invasive species without delay to reduce the difficulty and cost of eradication. And with that, we would ask that you avoid the overuse of chemicals. So it would be important to consider if mechanical or biological control methods are possible. Only use chemicals as a last resort. Herbicides should only be used by trained professionals, and only use herbicides that are approved for use near water. And it would be important to create a buffer zone to avoid non-target areas, and you should always consider spot treatment. So there are management resources available on our website, which you may be interested in taking a look at. But just be aware that these guidelines may not refer or take into account Irish regulations. So these documents will guide you in management approach, but just be mindful to have a site-specific plan and to ensure compliance with Irish law. So you can check with your local authority if on-site disposal authorisations are needed. And if you are removing a regulated invasive species from a site, you will need to first apply to National Parks and Wildlife Service for a licence to do so. We also do get asked about what funding is available for managing invasive species. So the NPWS have the Local Biodiversity Action Fund, which distributes funding to county councils who manage invasive species at a local level. LawPro also have the Community Water Development Fund, which I know is funding many invasive species projects around the country currently. And each year, Community Foundation Ireland also distributes biodiversity grants, and these can be used on invasive species management projects. You may also want to consider reaching out to corporations or companies to see if their staff would be interested in volunteering in management. So that's a great resource to harness. So fourthly, we would ask that you log your actions on our Actions on Invasives platform. So this is a mapping system which allows us to track measures that are being taken on invasives around the country. And what it does is it provides public recognition of your efforts, and it facilitates coordination on action. So for example, you may be managing Himalayan balsam on a river catchment, and if you log your project on Actions on Invasives, then other groups also working on that catchment can see where you're working, and it can help coordinate the groups working together. And I know that we have many professional oncologists or ecologists, online today. And I think it'd be important that if you're working on invasive species management plans or other projects, that you log that work once you have permission from your client on our portal as well, because this information is really useful for individuals and groups who want to try and tackle invasives. So the more information that we share on the platform, the more useful it is for everybody. So if there's one thing that you take away from the webinar today, is if you've worked on an invasive species, if you've managed it in your garden, or maybe you've implemented a biosecurity policy in your sports club, if you've taken any action on invasives, we'd ask that you log it on the platform. And there is guidance on our website, which will help you will show you how to add your actions, and the guidance is tailored to specific groups. So there's guidance for gardeners, community groups, county councils, etc. And finally, we'd ask that you spread the word, not the invasive. So we'd ask that you spread our key messages that we've shared today. Perhaps you're a member of our paddle sports club and you could implement a biosecurity policy, or maybe you know somebody who is managing invasive species and they could log their work on actions on invasives. And as Rachel mentioned earlier, next week is Invasive Species Week. So there is a number of events taking place online and around the country. So if you want to register for any of those, go to our website to reserve your spot. And we hope that you will join us again next week. We have a webinar next Wednesday evening with Ballymore Youth Environmental Group and Kildare County Council on balsam bashing. And this should be of interest to any groups or individuals that want to tackle invasives in their local community. And you can register to attend the webinar through the training and workshops page on biodiversityireland.ie. Just a bit on other resources that we have. So you can avail of the Regulated Plant Guide, which is on the Biodiversity Ireland shop. And we have a playlist with invasive species videos on our YouTube channel. And we also have developed a number of pathway action plans, which set out actions to prevent the unintentional introduction of invasives through various pathways. So 3 plans have been developed to date, and these are also on our website. And there's also a number of free resources and templates for posters and leaflets available on invasives.ie, and these can be adapted to include your group or club name. So thanks for your attention. If you have any queries about invasive species, do not hesitate in emailing us at invasives@biodiversityireland.ie. So thanks for your attention today, and we'll take some questions now.
Thanks a million, Kate. That was really interesting. And we've got a good few questions after coming in. So I'll just start from, I suppose, the very beginning. Daniel asks, in terms of marine invasive species, who bears responsibility for their management? Would you know that, Kate? Does it remain with the local authority or would it fall under the Department of Agriculture?
What I can say is I know that BIM, Board Ishkavara, is involved in monitoring invasive species. That's all I can really say on that, I'm afraid.
Perfect. So they'd be ideal then to reach out to ask for more information. Perfect. And Deirdre was wondering if there's good resources to find recent case studies about removal of invasive species in Ireland.
Well, I would first of all check out the Actions on Invasives portal because there are a number of projects that are logged on there, and some groups have attached their reports which detail how they manage those invasive species. Again, there's different resources on our website. And there would be examples from the UK as well that, if you quick Google search, but it's just important that you're going to a reliable source.
Perfect. There's a few questions, I suppose, around regulations, which I know maybe they might be better suited for some other organizations, but just in case, is a license required for the removal of all invasive species waste and contaminated soil, or is it just Japanese knotweed? Or how would they find out more information?
It's just regulated species. So those that would be listed on the first schedule, which is the national list, or those that are EU regulated. It's only the regulated species. So it's that you need licenses. But it would be best to email the NPWS to see if what licenses you need. And we'll be sharing the presentation after, so that email is included in there.
Yeah, and you would have seen throughout the presentation, I've put in a number of resources as well. So hopefully, I think maybe the first one was about legislation and regulations as well. So hopefully that might provide a bit more information. And the next question, is there an All Ireland invasive species mitigation plan?
An All Ireland or All Ireland?
Oh, sorry, All Ireland.
All Ireland. Not currently. There is no national management plan for invasive species.
Perfect. Yeah. There's actually been a few questions coming about cherry laurel and butterfly bush. So I suppose people were asking if it's regulated plant, and also, kind of what are your thoughts on it? It's a common hedge species. How could people tackle that?
So cherry laurel is very similar to rhododendron, and it has similar impacts, and it grows in a similar way, and it also can be managed in a similar way. But currently it's not regulated, but that doesn't mean that if you want to remove it, you can go ahead and remove it, but it's not currently regulated, which means there's no legal obligation for anyone to remove it. But it is an invasive species, so my thoughts are don't plant it if you can avoid it at all. Choose an alternative native species, and if you do have it in your garden, you can manage it by removing the seed heads and the flowers, or before they germinate, and that can be a way to stop it from spreading further.
And is the Bunlia bush I might be pronouncing that wrong.
Butterfly bush. So this is a very common invasive. Again, I believe it's not regulated, but it is very common and widespread. And you'll see that butterflies, that's why it's known as butterfly bush, and other pollinators are very attracted to it. So some beekeepers have been known to plant it deliberately, but it is a very invasive plant. But it's again currently, I believe it's not on the first schedule. I could be wrong about that, but the list is on our website if people want to double check.
And the question from Claire is wondering, is there any way that the government can clamp down on the sale of cherry laurel or wildflower seed mixes? Yeah, I'm not the best person to ask about seed mixes. You might want to direct that more to people working on the pollinator plan. But with regard to cherry laurel, because it's not regulated, we can't really clamp down. The government can't really clamp down on the sale of it until there's a regulation in place. So yeah. Perfect. And I suppose this kind of depends on maybe the impact of the invasive species in question. But someone asked, what's the turnaround time between submitting report and action being taken? Again, I think that's would be very dependent on the invasive species.
Yeah, so I mean, if it's one of the tagged species, which we have a species alert out for, um, response is taken very quickly. But again, it varies. I mean, are you talking about a plant that's been discovered in a new part of the country that hasn't been in before? Or are you talking about an animal like something like a raccoon, that's been reported, but we don't have a photo to verify it? So it is on a case by case basis, but anything that's on that list of species alerts that will get dealt with very quickly because it gets triggered within the hour. We get an email within the hour once it's reported. But my key message is if you are reporting something, please include a photo because if there's no photo, we can't verify it and we can't take it further unless we have very good evidence to suggest that it is the species that you've reported. So it's very important, particularly with sightings. We get a lot of reports of Asian hornets that usually aren't, well, they're not Asian hornets, they're typically sawflies. But unless you include a photo, we can't determine whether it's an Asian hornet or not. And that's the same when it comes to the nest. It's Asian hornet nests are very similar to our native wasp nests. So if you do find a nest, try and get a photo with the wasp on it. And that's the only way we can verify whether it's an Asian hornet nest or not.
Perfect. And I suppose within that question as well, it was saying around giant hogweed beside a playground. Would that be more focused then on like your local biodiversity officer that you'd be better off reaching out to?
Yeah, it sounds like if that's a public playground, that would be for the local county council. And often it would be the park section or potentially the biodiversity officer in that local authority who you can report that to. But if it's on public land, it is a responsibility of the local authority. Now, there is a possibility that it could be common hogweed as well. People do get confused between those two species. But I mean, at this stage, particularly at this time of year, you should be able to know whether it's giant hogweed because it'll be extremely tall and yeah, it's very aggressive looking.
Perfect. So do we, the National Biodiversity Data Centre, do any policy work or consulting work with the government around adding new legislations for invasive species?
I'm not aware of policy. We don't develop policy at the data center, but we do collate information that helps inform decisions that maybe the NPWS or the government might make in the future. So we do work on policy and risk assessment in particular. So that is one way that a species may get added to a list if it's gone through risk assessment. And we do have a risk assessment and contingency officer working with us within the Invasive Species Unit. But the unit is quite new, so a lot of these processes are just being developed and expanding on existing processes that were there before.
Perfect. I think you kind of nailed it on the head there, that really we're focused on gathering the data. That's why you've kind of said it's really important to submit we're safe to do so, get kind of a good clear image of whatever invasive species that you are submitting so that we can verify it. So that's kind of our role of what we do, is really it is the data gathering part that can help inform, but we're not directly involved. Actually, that you just mentioned that the Invasive Species Unit is still relatively new. Rebecca was asking, is there any collaboration between organisations north and south around invasive species?
Yes, there is. So within the Invasive Species Unit, there will be 3 officers that work on a shared island basis. So there's funding coming from the Shared Island Initiative on this. So those officers will be working on plans on an all island basis, working with our colleagues in the NIEA in the Northern Irish Government.
Fantastic. So I think we still have time for a few more questions. So if anyone has any additional questions, please pop them into the Q&A. So Dylan asked, are there ways in which we can get involved in invasive species management / research? Is there a website which posts openings?
To get involved in research related
to get involved in research or management.
Yeah, so there are consultancies that do management of invasive species if somebody wanted to work in that sector. Research, there are some of the universities do undertake research on invasive species. I know in UCD they do, and also, I mean, I think probably nearly every university in Ireland has projects on invasive species, but I mean, it just depends on, you know, your interests, and do you want to do a PhD, or, you know, where do you want to end up? So yeah.
And I think if you're looking at more of maybe community focused, then it's worth looking at what are the local organisations. You've a Tidy Towns, Men's Sheds, any of those kind of local organisations. A lot of them have a sustainability plan, which would include biodiversity in it as well. So they might have some projects or some kind of events. Like, for example, we have the Balsam Bashing community focus webinar. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities to get involved. And Kate, I think it was great that you were saying the universities as well are a really good source.
Yeah.
Perfect. So there's this question. I didn't notice any mention of the alpine newt. Are we tracking this species?
Yeah, well, speaking of research, there is current research being done by, I think it's the UCD and the Herpetological Society of Ireland on alpine newt. So we will have more information about that when that research is published. But it is, I believe, has been recorded in the middle of the country and possibly in Galway as well. And it's, so there will be more information soon once that research is published. But until it's published, I guess we don't want to be making conclusions. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I think Rebecca is saying what we're all probably feeling. Glad to see I'm not the only one frustrated about cherry laurel. Seems to be the invasive species of interest. So she was just wondering, how do species get added to the EU third schedule species, and how often is it reviewed?
So the third schedule is a list from previous regulation, but new regulation came in last year, and that's going to be replaced with the first schedule list. And then the EU list, the of union concern, that's a separate list. So there isn't really a review process for adding species. Species will be risk assessed, as I was saying. The risk assessment officer will be undertaking assessment, but it isn't like there's a periodical review of that list. There may be for the European species of concern, because there are 6-year cycles to do with reporting on EU species, but there isn't any known timeline that I'm aware of for reviewing the list.
Perfect. And Emer's just popped in there. So not a question, just say that the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management have a briefing paper on the biodiversity net gain. So I'm going to publish that and maybe copy it over to the chat as well, just in case anyone is interested in reading more about that. I think we have time for one more question. So someone has asked if you could give a quick update on the spread of grey squirrels. Has it slowed down or been reversed?
I don't actually know about that. I know that the red squirrel population, I think, has expanded a bit in places where the grey squirrel has been predated on by the pine marten. I think there's been some evidence to show that the red squirrel is doing better due to the pine marten. But I couldn't say. I mean, you can always go on to biodiversity maps and you can kind of track what the records there, because they are verified records that are on our map there.
Perfect, Kate. Really appreciate that. I think we're coming to the end now. Yeah, there's just, I suppose, one more question about the white-toothed shrew, about management around that species.
There's no current management at a national level that I'm aware of. So, I mean, it's kind of here to stay. I think, I mean, you would have seen that map that I showed earlier with the records. And unfortunately, yeah, I think the greater white-toothed shrew is here to stay. So yeah, I'm not aware of any current management programs.
Okay, perfect. Well, Kate, thank you so much. Really appreciate you giving us an introduction to invasive species. And just a reminder that Invasive Species Week does kick off next week. And there's countless events and webinars going on, so please check them out on invasives.ie as well. Appreciate everyone for taking the time to attend today, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one. Have a lovely day, guys. Thank you.